May I remind everyone attending this meeting that the proceedings will be broadcast live on YouTube and capable of repeated viewing. Thank you. I will now ask my chaplain, Reverend Ruth Cartwright, to say prayers.
Good evening, everybody. And it's that time of year again, so our prayers have a Christmas flavour. Lord Jesus, forgive us when we forget that in the midst of all our Christmas presents, you are the gift. In the midst of all our partying and noise, you are the baby in the manger. In the midst of all our angst and conflicts, you are the Prince of Peace. In the midst of all our darkness, you are the light of the world. In the midst of every moment of our lives, you are our Emmanuel, God with us. Amen. Amen. Dear Lord, there are various jobs where we are kept busy over the Christmas season, and we pray for our counsellors as they attend Christmas events, help to raise money for charity, and still have to prepare for Christmas at home. We pray too for council officers who work in the background and for those who are on the front line, responding to the sorts of crises and problems that arise all through the year, but which can be harder to resolve at Christmas. We pray that on Christmas Day and afterwards, there will be a chance for rest and reflection as we gear up to another year full of activity. We pray too for the citizens of Castle Point, some of whom are struggling as the cost of living rises. We thank you for all those in official and voluntary organisations who are seeking to help and ask you to give them energy to respond appropriately and guide them to act fairly and resourcefully. Amen. Amen. And a blessing. May God's peace bring reconciliation in a troubled world. May the Prince of Peace bring peace to you, your home and your neighbourhood. In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Ruth. Item 1, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
Yes, Mr Mayor, apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Cutler, Beverley and Owen Egan, Councillor Hart, Councillor Isaacs and Councillor Withers.
Thank you. I'm sure all members will join me in wishing Councillor Isaacs a speedy recovery. Item 2, members' interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No? Right. Item 3, minutes. Revised minutes have been circulated incorporating various amendments made to the motions under minute 26.1 to better reflect the various amendments made during the consideration of the motion regarding work to establish banking hubs throughout Castle Point. Are the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on October the 5th agreed as a corrected record? Agreed. Item 4, Mayor's announcements. Before I deal with any of my announcements, the leader of the council wishes to make a statement.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Members, I'm saddened and frustrated to report that the council's insurers have withdrawn the public liability insurance cover for the paddocks, which means that we have no option but to disappoint those hirers who have made bookings. I can confirm that the insurance of the buildings themselves remain in place. Unfortunately, the situation will be ongoing until we can resolve the issue with our insurers. Our officers are working hard to negotiate the reinstatement of the cover as quickly as possible. In the meantime, I can confirm that officers are making contact with all the affected hirers and are working with them to offer them alternative venues whenever possible so that they can continue to operate. This is extremely unfortunate temporary setback, but our commitment to the community who use the paddocks remains strong. We have a meeting next week with the Friends of the Paddocks Trust to agree the commissioning of a new expert reports, which together with nearly £900,000, we are planning to invest in this building to put us in a strong position to secure the future of the paddocks. I am unable to take any questions from members at this time because of the commercial sensitivity. But if any members wish to ask questions, please email myself or the Chief Executive. I will provide more information publicly as soon as I can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, David. I would like to begin my announcements by paying tribute to John Galley, the late Mayor of Chelmsford. John was a good friend and a man of great charm with a wicked sense of humour. He is missed very much by myself and my wife Dawn. This month, as you can imagine, has been busier than usual. I visited the Salvation Army Citadel at Hadley for Armistice Service and the Canvey Island Memorial for a Remembrance Service. Both events were very well attended as usual and were very moving. I was invited to the Mencap musical production at the Palace Theatre, and this was something that I must say was very, very uplifting and very funny. This was these people enjoying themselves, putting on a good show. Believe me, if you get a chance to see it, it's well worth the effort. Amongst the other events I've attended was the party to celebrate Alice Coulter's 100th birthday. And I give great credit to her neighbours who arranged a meeting for her at the Benfleet Yacht Club. Alice is absolutely wonderful for 100 years old. Last week we played host to 50 children from Fundersley Park School in this chamber. My thanks go to Bill Snow, who showed them around the nuclear bunker while a question and answer session was held in the chamber. So if any of your buttons are sticky, you know why they're sticky. It was a good day. And last Saturday, of course, was the Christmas light up for everyone. Canvey Islands one was packed, and I was there early in the morning when all the setup was going on, and I was there at Hadley in the afternoon to switch their lights on for them. It was lovely. Thank you. A few reminders. The Mayor's Charity Carol Concert in support of cancer research will take place on Sunday the 4th December. The Mayor's Charity Christmas Concert, as you now realise, we are doing our best to carry this on. The civic service at St Barnabas Church, Hadley, on Monday the 20th of March next year. And please support the reverse Advent calendar details which are included in last week's members' brief. The annual Mayor's Business Awards have been launched, closing date for those on the 31st of January next year. Item 5. Public questions have been received and set out in your agenda papers. Questions are to the Leader of the Council. May I remind everyone of the procedure. The question is asked and answered. There is no discussion on the question or answer. There is a number of options to respond to the meeting. No answer, answers at the meeting, or a reply will be sent after the meeting. All three questionnaires have asked that their questions be asked on their behalf. The Chief Executive will ask the first question. Leader, please reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first question is from Sean Quartermain, and the question reads as follows. What is your administration's position on the Local Government Boundary Commission for England's proposal for the future wards of Castle Point? In addition, do you oppose the current proposal to abolish the Canvey Island West Ward and its 2 councillors?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I thank Mr. Quartermain for the question. My answer is yes. I'm 100% against losing a ward on Canvey, of course, and I've got to say the fact that when the Boundary Commission come into us, they've got one idea is to reduce councillors. They do it all across the country. That was their role. and the administration looked at it, and originally it was going to be 6, and then it went down to 2, which the administration, I understand, agreed with. But no way in our wisdom we thought we was going to take away the West Ward. I'm personally against that because it makes my ward even bigger, and so I don't want that. But I honestly can't believe, to be honest, that they've looked at this and I think they've taken the easy option. Because I've got to say that when the Boundary Commission come in, they were talking about every ward should have 3 councillors. Well, the only ward in the whole borough that's got 2 is West Ward, so they decided, well, we'd do that. I personally will write a response as leader of the council. And can I just say, Mr. Quarterman, yourself and every other member of the public who is against this, you have till the 12th of December. So please get your objections in. I think this is an affront on democracy because I think all councillors do a sterling job. And I think, you know, by picking on West Ward, I don't think they've really seriously looked at it. When I looked at the map and you think, I've got to go through Winter Gardens to get to other part of Central now, which is in West Ward. So please, we support that 100%. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second question is from Robert Lillis, and it reads as follows. This October, the Secretary-General of the United Nations stated that, open quotes, there has been a tendency to put climate change on the back burner. If we are not able to reverse the present trend, we will be doomed, close quotes. He also stated that, open quotes, this is the defining issue of our time, close quotes. Sadly, the previous Conservative administration failed to declare a climate emergency here in Castle Point. Is now the time to do so. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Lillis, thank you very much for that question. And I can assure you it's something we all take seriously. Global warming is something you can't deny. And so the council does have a climate action plan, which dates back to the previous administration, sets out a series of 48 actions, which cuts across all council services, with particular focus on those services with the greatest associated level of carbon emission due to the nature of their operation. We are busy making preparations for budget setting in the new year, and we will invest in resources to ensure climate action plan can be delivered. Wherever possible, improve upon so that the climate awareness and carbon neutrality can be embedded in everything the council does going forward. But without a budget commitment, climate action plan is just words. So action speaks louder than words. And once again, once we've finalised the budgets, the council will then be in a position to make whatever statement is appropriate in the terms of its council's green credentials. But I know this is not a political agenda because everybody in this chamber, I know, is determined to try and do something about climate change. And I thank you for the question. We will be going forward with a climate action plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The third question is from Tim Copsey, and it reads as follows. Castle Point Borough Council is part of a partnership of local authorities known as ACELA and has been since 2017. There seems to be no method for the residents of our borough to hold it accountable for its decisions and actions. I would like to request that a review be undertaken to see if there have been any tangible benefits for the residents of Castle Point from being part of ACELA, and comparing that to the costs of membership both in monetary terms and councillor/officer time. I would request that the findings of this review be made public. Thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Copsey, for your question. ACELA is a key partner for the council that will help us deliver our ambitions for residents, businesses and the environment. At this very busy meeting this evening, I could take up an awful lot of time setting out ACELA's programme, progress and benefits for Castle Point. But under the arrangements of ACELA Joint Committee, each council is enabled to scrutinise ACELA through their own scrutiny committees. I think it would be helpful and timely to remind ourselves of the purpose, programme and benefits of ACELA. So I'm going to ask our officers to prepare a report to be considered by Cabinet and Scrutiny Committee to set out the great detail allow scrutiny to take place of a sellers programme in this borough. And the beauty about these committees is they're all public. So members of the public can come along and I think decide. And I think it is about time, because I've asked the questions myself, you know, what are the benefits of a seller to Castle Point? So there's a great opportunity for us all to be involved just to see what do we get out of the seller. And I thank Mr Copsey for that question, and I'm sure the answers will come through these committees and the Cabinet. Many thanks.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Thank you, Councillor Blackwell. Moving on, item 6. 2 questions have been received from members of the Council. Both are from Councillor Mrs Thornton. The procedure is the same as the public questions. Councillor Thornton, will you put your first question, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As this is a matter falling under Councillor Cole's responsibility, can he arrange for work to continue with the Castle Point Community Allotment Group to assess and advise the necessary requirements to make the access pathway to the site safely accessible and equality compliant for our mobility impaired and more vulnerable residents, and explore the feasibility of the council implementing the works necessary themselves or guiding the group to where suitable grant funding may be made available? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cole, would you reply, please?
Good evening, Mr Mayor, members, officers. Yes, I am pleased to confirm that we will of course continue to work with Castle Point Allotment Group to see what can be done to improve accessibility to our allotments. However, issues around accessibility are rare. As you have been informed, the path at Hadley was inspected, as is the usual for allotment sites. All our allotment sites have mowed grassed pathways. In respect of this particular path, on inspection it was found that the neighbouring plot holder had weed killed the grass, which had resulted in the path becoming very muddy. The allotment group were advised to level off the path with some of the wood chip that is available on site to resolve the issue. For information to improve accessibility, the path had been widened by removing the large water tank that was partially obscuring it last year. There is a cost to improving accessibility, and even if funding were available to provide a hard surface path, it would still not be possible for mobility impaired visitors to access the plot, as the plot itself is bare enough and not suitable for persons in mobility scooters. I would draw attention to the community garden run by Trust Links at the rear of the White House, which is far better suited for persons who have mobility issues. I thank you for your question.
Thank you. Councillor Thornton, would you like to put your second question, please?
This question is to Councillor Thomas as Chairman of the Environment Policy and Scrutiny Committee. Will the Chairman of the Environment Policy and Scrutiny Committee, when reviewing the Climate Action Plan to reinforce its commitment made to tackling climate change through the continuation of work already identified through the Climate Action Plan, consider action to introduce an easy-to-navigate, dedicated presence on its website in order that residents can quickly access details of this Council's climate action strategies, including, but not limited to, regularly updated versions of the Climate Action Plan, advice to residents and businesses on reducing their carbon footprint, regularly updated data on the current air pollution and water quality in the borough, advice to residents on waste reduction and recycling, links to initiatives, projects and schemes available through our partner organisations, and also, will the committee revisit the question of whether it feels now is the time to declare a climate emergency linked to the CAP? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Forden. Councillor Thomas, would you like to reply, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, yes. The short answer to your question is yes. The next meeting in the Environment, Policy and Scrutiny Committee is to take place on the 11th of January 23, and I will arrange for the matters you have raised to be considered in monitoring the Castle Point's Climate Action Plan. Mindful of the leader's recent reply to the question from Mr Lillis, the committee will also consider whether recommendations are appropriate regarding the declaration of a climate emergency. I thank you for your question.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Moving on, item 7. There is no business to be dealt with from the last council meeting. Item 8.
Mr Mayor, can I just call you back, if I may? You will recall that you were very kind to support the walk that you did and other members did for the Havens Hospice. And I should have taken the opportunity earlier, but I didn't want to stop you. So can I just let you all know that the actual walk has raised over £15,000 from everybody, and we are nearing £300 from the people that took part in here. So it's a big thank you, and obviously a lot to support in the future. But thanks very much, Mr Mayor and members. Thank you.
It's quite all right, Councillor Riley. I had great pleasure in seeing you stagger off. Recommendations from Cabinet. We have an item to deal with concerning council tax support. A report has been circulated. Councillor Fuller, as cabinet member for the resources, could you please deal with this item?
Mr Mayor, before Councillor Fuller interrupts, item 8 wasn't mentioned, just for prosperity. Item 8 wasn't mentioned. It's simple, but we run efficient.
Item 8, there was no urgent decisions taken by the Cabinet. Is that okay? Sorry.
Thank you very much, sir.
Right, thank you, Mr Mayor. The report which I wish to present this evening is the Council Tax Support report. It provides Council with a summary of the results of the public consultation on the proposed Council Tax Reduction Scheme for 2023 and to 24, and to provide Council with full details of the proposed scheme and seek approval to adopt the scheme from the 1st of April 2023. Now, members, you will have had full details of all of the report and all of the appendices in your information packs. You will see that it's a considerably weighty document. I'm not going to read through it all this evening. What I intend to do is, on the report itself, is to bring your attention to those items within the report which I think are important. And there is, as I said, there is full explanation within the appendices of the report itself. The recommendations which I will be calling for tonight is that members note the consultation results as outlined in section 5 and appendix A of this report. Also that members note the details of the CTR impact analysis and the full stage second equality impact assessment contained in appendix B and C of the report. And that thirdly, members note and approve for adoption from the 1st of April 2023 the CTR Scheme 2023-24 and CTR Transitional Protection Scheme 2023-24, which is detailed in Appendix D and E of the report. So that's all the numbers out the way. The background information for this, you'll remember the report follows earlier reports to Council setting out the requirement for Council to review and approve the local council tax support scheme for 2023-24. And at its meeting in September 2022, Cabinet approved adoption of a banded CTR scheme for working age customers subject to a 6-week public consultation. And that consultation period has now concluded, and this report sets out the results along with a full equality impact assessment and full details of the final recommended scheme for members' consideration and approval. Only 2 more pages to go. The consultation results. The consultation was publicised to both existing LCTS claimants and residents of the borough generally. In total, there were 1,800 existing LCTS claimants. These were directly written to and invited to take part. 4 social media posts were issued, which achieved a reach of 3,311. and details were added to the latest news section on the Council's website, and this attracted in itself 812 visitors. The consultation closed on the 13th of November, and a total of 276 responses and 674 comments were received. And a summary of the results and most frequently commented questions is provided at Appendix A. And I urge you to look at Appendix A because it gives an extremely full and detailed response to all of those questions which were raised. And it explains quite a lot about the scheme itself, along with further details about the scheme and the demographics of the LCTS caseload. And this was there to address the queries and concerns which have been highlighted through the consultation process. Just a few paragraphs about the equality impact assessment and the transitional protection. The consultation results and comments particularly highlighted some concerns over those who may lose entitlement as a result of the move from an LCTS to a CTR scheme, and concerns over the impact of the scheme on households and communities with large families. Analysis has therefore been undertaken with regards to these two specific concerns. This is Appendix B, and a full-stage equalities impact assessment carried out, and that's the results of that are on Appendix C. As a result of this work, a council tax reduction transitional protection scheme has been developed, which is again detailed in Appendix D, to sit as an addendum to the current exceptional hardship scheme, which forms part of the recommended CTR scheme, which is again detailed in Appendix E. So the CTR scheme and the CTR transitional protection scheme are legally required to be reviewed and approved annually, and as such it is proposed that the ongoing impacts highlighted in paragraph 6.1 will be monitored across 2023-24 to help inform the recommended scheme for 2024-25 in due course. There are financial implications, and these are covered in section 7 in your report. The overall cost of the CTR scheme based on 2021-2022 caseload has been estimated at £1.5 million, although this figure makes no assumptions regarding uplift to council tax or caseload. The overall cost of the scheme is broadly in line with the previously budgeted provision for the LCTS scheme. Costs for implementing a simplified CTR scheme are currently estimated at £87,000 for 2022-23, with ongoing annual costs of £15,900. This is a slight increase from earlier estimations, which were £60,000 and £14,500 respectively, reported to Cabinet in September, and is largely attributable to resources required to release capacity to undertake the implementation work. It is impossible at this stage to quantify the level of efficiencies the scheme will deliver. Some efficiencies are expected to be non-cashable, i.e. freeing up resources within the service which either can be used for other skilled tasks or at very least will help to reduce the current dependency on agency staff. Some cashable reductions in print and postage costs are also anticipated once the scheme has commenced. The transitional protection scheme is expected to increase demand on the exceptional hardship scheme by about 25,000. Finally, I'd just like to look at just very briefly run through the human resources, equality, human rights section. Movement to a simpler and less admin-heavy scheme is expected to lift some of the burden on first contact and benefit staff, freeing up valuable resources to deliver other key initiatives, i.e. energy rebate payments and supporting residents through the current cost of living crisis. Since the pandemic, the revenues and benefits job sector has been under significant strain with specialist skills under increasing demand and low supply resulting in higher costs. The simplified nature of the CTR scheme requires less specialist skills and is therefore expected to be easier to resource and to reduce reliance on agency staff. A full Stage 2 equality impact assessment has been completed to inform the design of the final scheme and the transitional protection arrangements. This has given due regard to the impact on large working families and has sought to mitigate any of the inequalities identified by result of the consultation and analysis. So that's the end of my dialogue on this. But I just say I would like to, in finishing that, the recommendations are in the report before you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor, for that very, very full report. Councillor Blackwell, will you second that recommendation?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll second that.
Thank you. Councillor, are there any other recommendations agreed?
Great.
Agreed.
Moving on, item 10. There is a matter from the Licensing Committee which took place on the 23rd of November. Council is asked to approve and adopt the statement of the licensing policy. Councillor Tom Gibson, as Chairman, will you take this, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, a meeting of the Licensing Committee took place last week to review the Council's gambling licensing policy statement. This review takes place every 3 years. The statement policy presented to you this evening for approval has been revised to reflect the changes suggested by the committee. I move the recommendation that the Council agrees and adopts the revised gambling licensing policy statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Blackwell, will you second that?
Second that, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Is the recommendation agreed and approved and to adopt it? May I ask, item 11, Castle Point Plan. May I ask the Chief Executive to present the report before us?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm pleased to introduce this report, which is the first step in the creation of a new local plan for Castle Point. I'd like to thank Ian Butt, Head of Policy and Planning, and his colleagues for this comprehensive report, which sets out in detail the significant work and preparation undertaken to get to this point. In particular, close collaboration with central government and partners around the national direction of travel for local plan making. The new Castle Point plan will be approached in a very different way from its predecessor, although it must legally follow the same statutory path. It begins with a new approach to public engagement designed to elicit meaningful feedback and create a genuine dialogue which will inform, shape and stimulate the process, ensuring that the Castle Point plan will be prepared in a way which reflects the views of local communities, businesses, stakeholders and partners. The work will be overseen by the Castle Point Plan Board, a cross-party body which will lead from the front and ensure transparency. It requires £1.65 million to be set aside, and so, members, I commend to you the recommendations set out in paragraph 3 of the report.
Thank you. Councillor Blackwell, as Leader of the Council, will you move the recommendations?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I take great pleasure in moving the recommendation in 6 parts as a new beginning for this council, and I hope a cross-party approach to putting in a plan which will be for the future of all our residents and safeguarding our... sorry, Colin, I know what you're going to say. I'll just move the recommendation.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, but you don't actually know what I'm going to say, Councillor Blackwell.
Councillor Riley,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
This is just proposing. We've got to have it seconded.
Oh, I do apologise. Sorry.
Thank you. Warren.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll gladly second it.
Thank you. Anybody wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. As the only former leader of the council that brought forward a plan, local plan as they were called then, which didn't include any green belt construction at all, I'm really just seeking assurance or reassurance, really, that this new plan, as it's called, Mr Mayor and members, will look to do the same as we did then in those days, which is really try not to bring, or not bring forward any development in green belt fields. That's what I'm only asking. Thank you.
Good.
Reassurance, really, Mayor.
Can I ask for a call? Can I ask? Mr. Butt?
Thank you, Mayor. At this stage, this is the beginning of the preparation of the new local plan. Remind members that we have a long process to go through, and as the Chief Executive has mentioned, we have to make sure that we follow the legally compliant process as laid down by government. So everything will be done to try and ensure that we can accommodate local needs appropriately and within urban areas as far as we possibly can. But may I just caution members in terms of predetermining the process by assuming that there will not be necessary to make any changes to the Greenbelt. We just, at this moment in time, I'm afraid, we just don't have that answer. But the process that we're going through will build the data and the evidence to give us that answer. And as part of the process, one of the first tasks we are going to be doing, as laid out in the report, is a very deep dive into the capacity of our urban areas to see what can be accommodated and to run various scenarios around that capacity. And if that capacity is sufficient to meet our needs, then that will then provide us with the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Ian Butt. That's the reassurance I was seeking. Thank you.
The council recommendations are set out in the report. Are these agreed? Agreed. Item 12, staff appointments and review panel. May I ask the Chief Executive to present the report, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Members, this is a very simple report asking for approval of the terms of reference and appointment to the Staff Appointments and Review Panel to enable that forum to have oversight of workforce and other staff matters as is set out in the report, and therefore I commend to you the recommendation in paragraph 3.
Councillor Blackwell, will you?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation.
Councillor Cole, will you second that, please?
Yes, Mr Mayor, thank you very much. I second it.
Council, the recommendation is set out in the report. Is this agreed? Item 13, constitutional update. May I ask the Chief Executive to present the report before us, please?
Thank you again, Mr Mayor. Members, this is also a very simple report asking for approval of the Model Code of Conduct and other non-material amendments undertaken by the Monitoring Officer in the furtherance of his role. Members, this is an ongoing duty and further amendments will inevitably arise as the Council progresses along its transformation journey and structural changes following the Boundary Commission changes that have been referred to earlier. And so, members, again, accordingly, I commend recommendations in paragraph 3.
Thank you. Councillor Blackwell, as Leader of the Council, will you move the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Cole, Deputy Leader of the Council, would you second the memo?
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I second this recommendation. Thank you.
Council, the recommendations are set out in the report. Are these agreed? Item 14, report of the Leader of the Council, David Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As if I've not done enough talking tonight, but I'll try and make it pretty sweet, short. Members, we spoke about the last Cabinet meeting about the flood forum, and that will be coming to Cabinet in December, and I'm keen that members get involved because it's a great opportunity, the flood forum, because it will be an opportunity for us to identify areas in our community which we feel suffer from surface water flooding. And I think in that way we can actually call in members from the various organisations to see how we can resolve issues of flooding, because we all suffer it and we've had a lot of rain lately, and it'll give us an opportunity. So I'm looking forward to the flood forum starting up. Since the last meeting, members, arranged a meeting with all the multi-agencies about the fires we had on Canvey through the summer. It seems such a long time ago, but they were horrendous fires. And we had a very, very good meeting. The meeting was asked for by the landowners, especially the farmers out on Canvey West Marsh, which were quite concerned about their cattle when the fires got out of control. And I'll say that it was an excellent meeting because what came out of it was the looking at how we can try and alleviate such horrendous fires next year if it happens again. And it's all climate change, I'm afraid. So we're looking at producing fire breaks. So the fire brigade have gone away. They're going to work with the council on some of the land we own. They're going to work with the RSPB, some of the land, and the Salvation Army to try and look at areas where they can create fire breaks. One important thing for me, members, is at the end of January we commemorate the 70 years of Canvey flood. I was old enough to be in it, and I still remember it quite well. There were devastating floods along the whole of the Canvey east coast, and there was a lot of loss of life on Canvey Island. So there are many events planned which we will play our part on this, and I hope members will also play their part. I know the Lord Lieutenant is coming down on one of the days. It's over a 2-day period. The Essex Record Office, the Library, the Town Council, and the fire station, they're all getting involved in various
programme. So please, members, remember that. We'll put out more information nearer to the date. Of course, the cost of living, big issue now. It was reported to Cabinet last month. We have put in an action plan, which please assist your residents and point them to our website, where there's plenty of information, where they can gain information if they need help. One of the things what's really on my agenda is the way we communicate with people. And I think we've got a lot of work to do, but there will be a report coming to Cabinet on how we can improve our communications with our residents, and I think that is so important. And we still have plenty of meetings taking place with all our organisation and partners. If any member out there feels there's an organisation out there that needs to have a discussion with the council, please feel free to get in touch. I think we should connect to all these organisations. How we can work together in partnership is so important. Lastly, this is the last full council before Christmas, so it leaves me to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Blackwell. Item 15, notice of motions. We have some motions to deal with. Number 1, Mrs Mumford, would you like to put your motion, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to propose the following motion. For reasons of promoting a healthy lifestyle within the borough, in line with the Castle Point Borough Council Wellbeing Strategy 2022 to 2025, we call upon Castle Point Borough Council to extend the current no smoking policy to include vaping within the grounds of the council offices and to enforce this to ensure compliance. We also call upon the council to extend this policy to include the 2 leisure centres and all other council-owned buildings except in designated outside smoking and vaping areas. My reasons for putting this motion to council this evening is not only to ensure that this council's no smoking policy is updated to include vaping within the grounds of the council, but to extend this to all council-owned buildings and the grounds, including the 2 leisure centres. It is the policy of this council to promote a healthy lifestyle within the borough and to change the council's no smoking policy as outlined in the motion will support that. At the moment, very often, users of our premises have to walk past smokers standing near to the entrances, which I'm sure you will understand is not ideal, and if this motion is accepted and a ban enforced, this will stop this practice. One of the 3 key pillars of the Castle Point and Rochford Health and Wellbeing Strategy 2022 to 2025 states that residents should feel empowered to improve their health and wellbeing and to build resilience to enable them to live well. This motion supports this key pillar and also supports most of the 10 strategy principles. Of course, the reference in my motion should have been to the Castle Point and Rochford Health and Wellbeing Strategy. Many thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Skip, I understand you will second the motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very happy to second this motion. As stated in the motion, this not only sends out a message that this policy will be taken seriously, but also sends out a positive message that this council takes its commitment to the Castle Point and Rochford wellbeing strategy seriously, and will continue to promote the health and well-being of its residents. With your permission, Mr Mayor, I would like to bring up a side issue arising from this, and this relates to the scourge of the increasing number of cigarette butts littering our streets and open spaces. Apart from the obvious risk of grass fires, which Councillor Blackwell referred to in his leader's report, we have that we experience in this borough during the summer due to the effects of global warming. There is a more serious long-term issue that arises from this practice. Cigarette filters are made of a plastic called cellulose acetate, which, when dumped, not only dump that plastic, but also nicotine, heavy metals, and other chemicals into the environment. Recent research has found that cigarette butts inhibit plant growth and will get into the the waterways and eventually into the oceans and ultimately into the food chain. Research shows that a typical cigarette butt can take between 12 to 15 years to break down, and so the potential to pollute is enormous. This policy, if adopted by this council today, will go some way to help with this, but I would ask that consideration be given to placing cigarette butt bins at strategic sites around the borough to help reduce this type of litter. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr Mayor. Oh no, I move to recommend.
Thank you, Councillor Skip. Anybody wish to speak? Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I'm in great sympathy of a part of this motion, but there is a big part of this motion which really gives me a lot of problems. I'm a firm believer of freedom of choice, and I think if the motion said that this local authority should have maybe a smoking area, I understand what you're saying. I don't want to come to the door and if someone's smoking, I feel uncomfortable myself if they moved away from the... But a part of this really makes it very complicated, because what it's basically saying, within the grounds of the council offices and including leisure centres and other... Now that means the whole of Waterside Farm Leisure Centre. That means all the football pitches. That means everything round there, because they are the grounds of the sports centre. So are we going to ban people from smoking out in the sports fields, out in our parks? That's the thing that worries me. If we'd have withdrawn the part of grounds, you know, it's difficult. None of us want people smoking near us, and it is, and I fully support it 100%, but it's the grounds bit, because we don't want people to think we're in any state. You can't go down the sports pitch and smoke while you're watching. Yeah, you can't go out. Our staff go right in the far car park to have a smoke way away from the building. Some people are addicted; they can't be helped. So I would definitely say, you know, if we exclude within the grounds, I think you may get support. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to come back by saying what this motion actually meant was the grounds of the council offices, not necessarily the grounds of all council-owned buildings. Extend the policy to include the 2 leisure centres, so it is actually to have non-smoking, as you say, designated smoking areas near to these places, but not, it doesn't actually mean... It means the grounds of the council offices. Also, can I also add, perhaps it should be within 10 metres of the buildings? We call that grounds, 10 metres of the building.
I'm sorry, but we can't keep changing the motion as we're changing the motion and adding bits and pieces to this. The motion reads what's in the paper. Can we keep to the motion, please?
So if you're putting the amendment forward to delete the word the ground.
Excuse me, Councillor, can you sit down a moment, Councillor? Councillor Hope, Officer Open, will you please clarify everything that's going on here at the moment?
No amendment has been put forward to amend the motion, so if changes are to be made to the motion, it needs to be done by an amendment, and the proposer and seconder can agree it or not, as the case may be. So, otherwise, the debate is continuing on the basis of motion as it has been put to the meeting. So, just for the avoidance of doubt, at present, debate is taking place on the motion as it has been put to the meeting. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Did everybody hear that? Sorry. Right.
Councillor Savage.
Council, within the council grounds, we're going to have to put signage up, etc., and there's a cost implication. So I don't understand why this didn't go straight to cabinet.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Savage. The council does already have a non-smoking policy, and which, as you've already heard, requires members of staff who do smoke to do so away from the main building. There is a designated smoking area. The substance of the proposed motion is to extend that policy to include vaping, and to that extent, to pick up the point raised by Councillor Blackwell, comments in relation to extending to council buildings and other grounds does extend the terms of the existing policy.
Right, we are still discussing the motion as it appears on the paperwork. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I suggest an amendment to Councillor Mumford's motion, which removes the word "within the grounds of the council offices" to vaping within 10 metres of the council office building? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can just comment that there is a policy at the moment which allows people to smoke within a designated smoking area, and it's the designated smoking area which is the defining point, not whether it's 10 metres or any other distance from the building. So it would be incredibly difficult to operate, enforce, and even to delineate a 10-metre radius. And I just offer that up, Mr. Mayor, not to stymie the debate, but just to give you an indication of what the policy already covers, which is that smoking policy is no smoking within the building or its environs except within the designated smoking area. To the extent that this motion intends to extend that to vaping, that is one thing. A motion that intends to change the policies is another.
Mr. Mayor, the Chief Executive has just explained that that is not an effective amendment. So again, we are continuing debate on the motion as it has been put forward this evening.
Yes, I'd like to reiterate what Councillor Skipp said about the cigarette butts and how long they take and the poisons that they leach into the environment, either through the ground, where they're dropped on the ground, or that eventually can get into the water. And we've got a substantial... The Castle Point Climate Action Group have been campaigning on this for quite a while.
Mr. Mayor, he's correct. That is not part of the motion.
Right. Councillor Mumford, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I welcome Councillor Blackwell's intervention there, because I think that the nub of this motion, as far as I understand it and read it, is actually to talk about the buildings and the immediate curtilage of those buildings. So I don't think the grounds, in the broadest sense, of Waterside actually enter into this. I think it actually says we call upon the council to extend this policy to the 2 leisure centres and all other council-owned buildings, except in designated outside smoking and vaping areas. So clearly we can't control people if they're going to walk across open fields and be smoking, but I think in the confines of the buildings and their immediate environs, then I think, and smoking could be contained to smoking areas, then I think the motion is sound. Thank you.
As far as I see, the only addition to the existing policy that we need to apply is just add the word vaping. You know, in terms of distances or buildings or grounds or whatever, it's totally irrelevant if the issue is the addition of people smoking vapes rather than smoking cigarettes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just thinking about what we're presented with. We seem to have a motion which is a at best ill-conceived and practically is impossible to support, simply because of the dimension implies that we are talking about grounds, and those grounds are not defined. The whole thing seems to me a little bit of a mishmash. Already we're talking about retracting some of it. Can I just say that I don't think it can be voted for in this form. It needs to, if this is a serious attempt to improve the understanding of what's available and what you can do and what you can't do in terms of smoking and vaping, I think then there has to be a better method than just jumping at an ill-conceived motion presented to this council, and I certainly couldn't support it. Thank you.
Councillor Mountford.
Thank you, Mayor. I think there's two issues here. Sorry. I think there's two issues here. One of it is that vaping is one of the primary things within this particular motion, which should be included within the policy, and also the upholding of the policy. Because I think one of the things that's actually brought this motion forward is that the policy is not being upheld, and that's why we're finding cigarette butts and things around there. So maybe one of the elements in here is the upholding of the policy. Thank you.
Councillor Ainsley.
I think the policy as we have it at the moment, it says, sorry, I think the policy that we have at the moment, it just says smoking. Now, smoking doesn't indicate if it's cigarettes or vaping, it's smoking. So it covers smoking, cigarettes and smoking, vaping. I think it doesn't need changing.
Councillor Mrs Mumford, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Actually, I have been told, when I have sought further advice, that the current policy does say smoking and it doesn't include vaping, and it needs to include the word vaping. That's from what I have, the advice that I have sought from officers. And the other thing that I would like to say is that the heart of this policy really was to stop our residents, members of the public and other people, anyone really who doesn't smoke, to have to walk past people that are smoking at the entrances to our council buildings. And that's the heart of the motion. You know, not to include football pitches and things like that, but you know, I myself, various council buildings have seen people standing, congregating, smoking, and it just isn't a pleasant thing to do. And I think that I would like to leave this as it stands, because I think you know, it does fit in very well with our Castle Point and Rochford health and wellbeing strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mumford. Can I have a show of hands, please, for those in favour of the motion?
Mr Mayor, can I sum up on this as well, please, if I may? Thank you.
No.
It's for the proposer of the motion.
It's for the proposer of the motion to sum up. Can I have a show of hands for those in favour of the motion, please? Thank you. Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
The motion has failed. Sorry.
Mr Mayor, could I just bring a point of information, please? Because I think the motion was put in for the best intentions. I think just the wording was confused people. And may I suggest maybe it goes to the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee to look at making sure we have the policy well and truly tightened. And I think that would be a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'll ensure that is taken forward.
The second one.
Motion 2.
Yeah. Motion 2. Councillor Mrs Mumford, would you like to put your second motion, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We call on Castle Point Borough Council to investigate the opportunity to mark the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II by renaming Tarpots Recreation Ground in her honour. Before I read out what I've written here, I would just like to speak from the heart a little bit about Tarpots Recreation Ground. It's a much treasured and used green space within our Castle Point Borough, and you know, we all know how important that is. It's got 5 entrances. One of them is Rush Bottom Lane. Opposite is a church and 3 schools, and the park is used, and a GP surgery, and the park is used by people often using this entrance and lots of children. And then we've got another entrance where we've got a building called Tyrrell's, which is a community building which is used for health and well-being, and also attended by elderly people, so they look over onto the park. We've done lots of things as a council there, which I thank all the officers and everyone involved. We've got a wildflower garden, benches, a football post, and lots of other things. So it is something that's well used, and I'm just speaking from the heart about how I know how much our residents do, you know, really love this park. Anyway, I'd like to read what I've got here. One of many reasons for proposing this motion to council is to recognise the devotion shown by our Queen to our country and her duties. I was asked on International Women's Day this year, before the Queen's sad passing, to name a woman who most inspired me during my lifetime. I chose Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II because, amongst other reasons given, I said she has worked tirelessly and remained stoic through many difficult times. I feel it is only correct that she deserves a fitting tribute here in Castle Point in recognition of this. I reserve the right to speak later. And in the spirit of Christmas, I have somebody here who agrees with me that I just thought I'd bring along in the spirit of Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLean, I understand you wish to second this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted to second Councillor Mumford's motion. I know she's worked hard over the last couple of years to introduce improvements to Tarpots Recreation Ground. The outpouring of grief from our community on the death of the monarch was evident for all to see, and I believe that the renaming of the park in honour of the late Her Majesty the Queen would be fitting and popular with Castle Point residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anybody else?
I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion, if that's the case, if it's appropriate, or I'll speak on my reasons why. Right.
Please read out your amendment.
Bear with me. Castle Point Borough Council should explore a suitable and appropriate way of honouring Her late Majesty the Queen in a lasting tribute to her decades of selfless service. So this is just one idea. That's the amendment I would like to put forward. There are a lot of other ideas in the pipeline as well. Shall I read that again for the sake of... Castle Point Borough Council should explore a suitable and appropriate way of honouring Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth in a lasting way as a tribute to her decades of selfless service.
Thank you, Councillor Balker. Is that an amendment? You wish to second it? I'll ask for a second in a minute. Just let's make sure that what's going on is right.
Councillor Barker, if we've understood your amendment correctly...
Councillor Balkin.
I do apologise. It's my age, sorry. Councillor Barker, if we've understood your amendment correctly, to make this effective, we should add to the amendment to the end of Councillor Mrs. Mumford's original motion, and we should explore some other and to explore some other appropriate commemoration of her long service. Or by, sorry.
If I may expand on that, the reason for the amendment is fairly brief.
Yeah, sorry, I missed out on all, sorry. It should read, or at the end to add, or by some other appropriate commemoration of her long service.
Do you want to read out the whole of it again?
Is that acceptable? So just for the avoidance of doubt, the amended motion would read, we call on Castle Point Borough Council to investigate the opportunity to mark the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II by renaming Tarport's recreation ground in her honour, or by exploring some other appropriate commemoration of her long service.
I've been trying to get your attention for a while, and I'm sorry to keep on being the point of order, King, but again, this should have cost implication, because if you're renaming that park, you're going to have to put signage up to say that the new name of the park.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just clarify that, the motion actually asks to investigate. It's not committing to anything, it's asking that we investigate some means of commemorating Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, could you read that motion, the amended motion out once more, please?
That's all right, read that one. Yeah. We call on Castle Point Borough Council to investigate the opportunity to mark the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II by renaming Tarport's recreation ground in her honour, or by some other appropriate commemoration of her long service. So basically you're getting everything you're wanting.
Can I have someone to second
First of all, is
the amendment?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if Councillor Bowker would indicate whether that's an acceptable understanding of his amendment. Thank you.
I think the point of the amendment was to say, rather than specifically nailing down an idea, there are lots of ideas in the pipeline. I can certainly give you one of those ideas that's going around at the moment. I would like the amendment to stand as standalone, as it were. Yeah. Should I actually just give you an idea of the kind of stuff that's writing about? No, we're just discussing the motion. Yeah.
Does he agree or not?
I suppose, yeah, I mean, basically you're being asked, do you agree the motion or not? Councillor Mrs Mumford's motion is specific, but your amendment kind of broadens it out to cover the other options which you wish to bring forward. So it doesn't stop you from bringing forward the other options you're talking about. It won't stop you from bringing forward, because the whole motion is calling on the various ideas to be investigated.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make an amendment to the amendment.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it hasn't actually, the amendment hasn't been
accepted. It hasn't been seconded
yet.
Right,
well, I'm going to change that last one.
The amendment hasn't been accepted yet, and there hasn't been a seconder to the amendment. So at present, we are still
waiting
back
for Councillor
talking
Bowker.
about the original motion. Thank you.
Right.
So where do we stand now? Has Bowker agreed it or not?
Excuse me. Councillor Bowker is being asked, does he agree the amendment? I've explained that.
No.
Right. Okay, that's fine then.
In that case,
Mr. Mayor, you need to ask
for a seconder.
For a seconder to the amendment.
Right. Can I have a seconder for the amendment, please?
Sorry.
No, he said no. No, he hasn't agreed the amendment.
No, he hasn't
agreed. So he's putting forward a new amendment, which is effectively
the new motion. Yeah. Mr. Mayor, what Councillor Bowker is proposing as an amendment. If it doesn't agree the amendment, in effect, what you are proposing is a new motion, and you can't propose a new motion at this stage. So,
Councillor Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I'd like to change motion put forward. We call on Castle Point Borough Council to investigate the opportunity to mark the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Would you like me to explain and carry on?
Is that all right? Is it an amendment? It's not an amendment, it's into a motion.
Amendment.
I'll second it. Thank you.
Councillor Mountford second.
Right, now I'll explain.
sorry,
Do you want a seconder for it?
I think Councillor Mountford second.
I'll second it. Thank you.
No,
Thank you.
I'm not this for.
Right. Then, no, sorry. Does Councillor Mrs Mumford, the proposer of the motion, original motion, accept the amendment?
That's where I was going.
Sorry.
I would like the original motion to stand because it does say to investigate the opportunity. It's not specifically saying to rename the Tarpots Recreation Ground.
Chairman, if you take a vote on the amendment, then.
Right, the amendment now has got to be voted on.
No. Oh, no, sorry.
Do we have a discussion?
Unless there's...
Do we have a discussion?
You can have a discussion on the amendment if you want, but...
Well, I think there's people there want it.
Okay.
Councillor Savage.
Sorry, but I have to come back to my original comment. You're investigating, the opportunity of honouring the Queen, or our former Queen, by changing the name of that park. Now, it's a play on words, but you can't in one breath say there's no cost implication and then say, oh, but we're going to buy changing the name of the park. It's one or the other.
Cost implication only comes in when you change the name, or want to change the name.
Yeah.
It would require further decision. If I may, thank you, Mr Mayor, just to answer Councillor Savage's point, the investigation piece is around the discussion as to whether or not something can be achieved and whether there are any cost implications arising from it. If there are cost implications arising from it which fall outside the current budget envelope, then it would require forward decision making, which would mean it would come back to the relevant governance forum.
Councillor Edwards.
Councillor Edwards.
Can I just say I don't think there's anybody in the room objecting to the principle of commemorating Her Majesty's service. But I think the problem we've got here is, are we going to have 30 or 40 of these different investigations kicked off to look at every possible opportunity in the borough? I think that would be a gross waste of time. I think what we should do is have an investigation, as suggested by my colleague, into ways that we could do it. It's the specificity of this one that's the problem for me.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Perhaps that I can, but building on Councillor Edwards' point, if I can make a suggestion then. In order to amend the, successfully and efficiently amend the motion put forward by Councillor Mrs Mumford, can I suggest then that we amend it to read as follows? We call on Castle Point Borough Council to investigate the opportunity to mark the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, for example, by renaming Tarpots Recreation Ground in her honour or by some other appropriate commemoration of her long service.
No. Okay, now if you'd let me to speak, then I'll explain.
We are now discussing the amendment. It has been seconded, and now we are discussing that amendment. Does anybody have something to say about the amendment? Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think we need some... settle down, people.
Councillor Fuller, is this about the amendment?
It is.
Right, thank you.
I was fortunate the previous weekend, last weekend, to be in concert with a number of representatives from councils all up and down, local authorities all up and down the country, on a LGA conference in Warwick. And one of the things which came out of that was a discussion, an informal discussion amongst us. There were a number of local authorities are currently investigating ways in which they can honour the sad passing of Her Majesty. And there are all sorts of decisions being made. And some of these we should consider. We should consider what the scope of our borough could offer as a means of commemorating the Queen. Swimming pools being renamed, parks, etc. So there is a process that you go through. It's not just simply a case of we will decide to rename this park. You have to go through the Lord Chamberlain's office for any use of the royal title or royal connection. You can't just make a decision, you have to make an application. And I did research this, and I'm sure Councillor Mrs Mumford has also done the research looking at the process of going through the Lord Chamberlain's office to get. You have to make a fully fledged, and it's got to be a properly documented. Now, that needs to be a strong case. And I think what we need to do is, in supporting this motion, I applaud the opportunity to include things like recreation grounds, buildings. There are a number of places which might actually fit very well. And if we could find something which maybe had some historical connection with the Queen, or some, some synergy in the ways of when perhaps a building was built, was built at the start of a reign or something like that. So I think it's not just a case of just taking something like, the recreation ground. It is a case of let's be very creative, let's work together and find somewhere in the borough that we can all agree would be an appropriate sort of case, if you like, for having that the naming. I'll say no more than that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Cole, could you please repeat your amendment?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, we call on Castle Point Borough Council to investigate the opportunity to mark the sad passing of Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II. And I will explain if I'm allowed to. Or do we have to sit down again and have another debate? Or shall I just tell the whole reason why?
He's speaking to explain his amendment, yes.
Okay.
Okie dokie. So, we love the Queen. I don't think there was anyone out here who disagree what she's done for our serving community. But there are four parts to this community. There is Benfleet, there is Canvey, there is Hadley, and there is Fundersley. Fundersley built the beams for the House of Lords, so it has got a proper tradition going back to our monarchy. By just participating on one area, we've got four parts. Canvey Island, you may want to investigate something for Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II. Fundersley, you may wish to investigate that. Benfleet may wish to investigate that. So by keeping it down, and it's very simple, what I'm proposing is that we set up a working committee, and we will look at our areas, and then we can all come together and decide of what would be best in Benfleet, Fundersley, Hadley, and surrounding. We might want to have one great big place area. We could have statue, anything. But we're targeting one area, we're not thinking about the rest of it. And there's more to this borough than just tar pots. And I'm the ward councillor who sits in tar pots as well. Thank you.
Does Councillor Mrs Mumford wish to reply to the amendment?
Councillor Mrs Mumford, do you wish to reply to the amendment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Members, I think all these discussions that are going on can be seen as being quite disrespectful to the memory of our Queen, which was what the motion was put forward. But I think I'll be willing to accept our Chief Executives.
Sorry, for the purposes of clarification, I'm not in a position to propose an amendment. The amendment that is currently being put forward and is being debated is the one that's put forward by Councillor Cole.
So we are still talking about... Can I call on a vote on this amendment, please?
Yeah.
Those in favour? Your one, the amendment. That's it.
The amendment is
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, do you want me to clarify what the vote is on? It would be the vote on the amendment is we call on Castle Point Borough Council to investigate the opportunity to mark the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So you are deleting the words by renaming Tarpots Recreation Ground in her honour.
Thank you. Those against?
Sorry, I didn't take it out. Those against.
Those against the amendment?
It's carried.
The amendment is carried.
So we now need to take a vote on the substantial motion. We now need to take that. No? Yeah. Mr. Mayor, just to be clear, the amendment having been carried, it becomes a substantive motion on which a vote should be taken. If you call a vote again, thank you.
This is a waste of time, isn't it? Can we have another vote, please, on the motion? Your motion, Steve. Yeah, well, you agreed on it. Now we've got to have a vote on it. Oh, the amendment.
Yeah.
It became the motion.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
I've just said that.
Right, that's fine.
I think everybody's agreed.
Right.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Oh, unanimous. Thank you very much. Motion number 3. Councillor Dixon, would you like to put your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion reads as the Conservative Group call upon Castle Point Council to reintroduce the firework fiesta in order to provide a safe community event for residents and to help minimise the traumatic effects of home fireworks, which adversely affect both residents and pets. Thank you.
Councillor McLean, will you please second the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second the motion from Councillor Dixon. Fireworks are great for family fun, but terrifying for some residents and animals. I think an organised display means that less people will hold home firework displays and alleviate the problem. I'm sure that a commercial partner could be attracted to consider sponsorship of the event. Rayleigh seems to be able to deliver an event and break even on costs. Thank you.
Thank you. As this motion has budget implications, the motion will be deferred without debate for a report to Cabinet Council Procedure Rule number 13 applies. The motion will be dealt with at this meeting. Item 16, petitions. There are none. There is no other business. As this is the last full council of the meeting of the year, I wish you all a happy Christmas and a happy New Year. Thank you all for your attendance.
Please all stand while the Mayor leaves the council chamber.